Praise be to God. Today's Bible portion is the book of Ruth. During the days of the judges, a famine struck the land of the Israelites. To escape the food shortage, Elimelech, a man from Bethlehem, took his wife and two sons to the land of Moab. Unfortunately, Elimelech died, and some years later, his two sons also died. Naomi was alone in Moab, except for her two Moabite daughters in law, Orpah and Ruth. Naomi planned to return to Bethlehem because she heard God bless the land with food. She told Orpah and Ruth to return to their mother's houses in Moab and find new husbands. Orpah kissed her mother in law and went on her way, but Ruth refused to leave Naomi. Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When Naomi returned to Bethlehem, the people of the town were excited to see her. She told them not to call her Naomi, but to call her Mara, because God had dealt very bitterly with her. Naomi and Ruth arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. At the time of the barley harvest, Ruth decided to go to one of the farmers' fields and glean. A gleaner was someone who went into a recently harvested field and picking up the grain that had been dropped or missed by the reapers. This was a common practice amongst the poor in Israel. God actually forbid farmers from gleaning their own land so the poor would be able to find something to eat. We read that in Leviticus chapter 19. Ruth gleaned in the field of a man named Boaz. When Boaz arrived, he asked the overseer about Ruth. The overseer told them, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." Boaz approached Ruth and spoke kindly to her. He told her to continue gleaning in his field and gave her permission to drink the water that had been drawn for his workers. Ruth bowed to Boaz and asked him why he was showing her special kindness. He told her it was because he had heard all about her love for her mother-in-law and how she cared for her after the death of her husband Elimelech. Boaz invited Ruth to eat with his workers, and he told his laborers to intentionally leave barley in the field for her to glean. At the end of the day, Ruth had collected close to an ephah of barley. When Ruth returned home to Naomi, her mother-in-law was surprised to see the quantity of barley. She knew someone must have been generous to Ruth. Ruth told Naomi about Boaz, and Naomi recognized him as one of their relatives, one of their redeemers. Naomi encouraged her daughter-in-law to remain in Boaz's fields, which she did until the end of the barley and wheat harvest. Naomi told Ruth to anoint herself, put on her cloth, and go to the threshing floor where Boaz would be spending the night. Ruth did as her mother-in-law instructed. She went secretly to the threshing floor. Then, after Boaz had fallen asleep, she uncovered his feet and laid down close to him. At midnight, Boaz awoke and was startled to see her laying near his feet. Ruth said to him, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Boaz was quick to accept the responsibility God laid on him, but there was one thing standing in his way. Boaz knew of another man who was a closer relative to Ruth, who was before him in the line of succession as a redeemer. Boaz told Ruth he would speak to the redeemer in the morning and sort out the situation. Before Ruth left the threshing floor, Boaz gave her 6 measures of barley to take home to Naomi. Ruth went back to her house and told Naomi all that had happened. Boaz went to the gate of the city to resolve the situation. As a relative of Ruth's, Boaz had the right and the responsibility to marry her and care for her, but a closer relative had to forego that right first. When Boaz found the closer relative, he gathered the elders of the city and explained the situation. Naomi was selling a piece of land that belonged to her husband Elimelech. As the closest relative, the first redeemer had the right to purchase the land. However, in doing so, he would also be responsible for caring for Ruth. The Redeemer wanted the lamb, but not a wife, so he relinquished his right and gave Boaz permission to redeem Ruth. The Redeemer took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz. This was the cultural way of showing that an agreement had been reached. All the people who witnessed the agreement were in favor, and they blessed Boaz and Ruth's union. Boaz and Ruth got married and had a son together. The woman of Bethlehem praised the Lord for being kind to Naomi's family after their grief in Moab. The woman of the neighborhood named Ruth's son Obed. Ruth was the great grandmother of King David. David was from the tribe of Judah, and his family tree is recorded at the end of the chapter 4. Thanks for listening. I hope it was useful. God bless.